So there are issues about things like ITAR, because some of our teams, in fact, if you go back to that list, most of those are from one team. I'll tell you more about them later, but we have an open source team that has people in probably 25 of these 30 countries. So they're going to have enormous issues with things like ITAR and Department of State because they are headquartered here in the US. That is an issue that we acknowledge and we require all of our teams to comply with, but it is a burden that's really upon them to figure out how to work. And one nice thing is, in addition to pushing the technological forefront, they're really going to be testing the bounds of ITAR and trying to find how they can make this work.
Do you know what ITAR is, and does it affect you guys at all? So, it's the International Traffic in Arms Regulations. So it's high technology that is either military or dual use, military civilian. And so it's basically export controls for anything that's military related. So the jurisdiction is State Department versus the Commerce Export Licensing regime, which, you know, maybe your servers and stuff probably fall under commerce export and stuff like that. So if that's not something that you're used to having to deal with, it's a major issue for countries like China and elsewhere with military technology. Basically your satellites or launch vehicles, which are essentially missiles, you know.
Certain high performance computers, I think, as well.
Yeah, so there are a lot of, you know, computing applications and things that do end up on the ITAR list, but I don't know if it's the kind of stuff you use. So if you don't have to deal with it, you're in good shape. It's much better.
Next slide, please. So we had an artist who did some artist renderings of the different crafts that are coming from each of our teams, and I'm happy to discuss any of these at more length, and I have some backup slides to do exactly that if you would like. But just looking at them quickly, you can see an enormous variety in what people are doing. We have some fairly traditional six-wheeled rovers. This is what NASA has done. This is what's on Mars now and what they have planned to send to other planets. But we're also looking at things like just giant balls that roll around, or walking octopus-looking robots. Or this sort of snake-like chain of linked robotics that all have you know, sort of collaborative intelligence. This is awesome because some of these ideas may never work, but we don't really need to care. If they don't work, we haven't spent any money on the team that did them. And if they do work, if they catch us all by surprise, we absolutely benefit from the work that they've done. It's sort of the best of both worlds, where people can afford to be a little crazy and try really out-of-the-box ideas, and we're going to gain knowledge from that regardless of how it goes. Someone's going to say 10 years from now, hey, that walking robot idea wasn't such a good idea after all, or they're going to say, this was the greatest idea, I'm so glad somebody tested this out for me, because now there's been a total paradigm shift and this impacts every NASA mission and every European mission, et cetera, et cetera. The teams, not only in being diverse in their concepts and in their countries, are quite diverse in their makeup. So we have teams that are almost entirely led by students. For example, this team here is called Astrobotic. They're based out of Carnegie Mellon University and the University of Arizona, along with partnership from Raytheon, which is an enormous aerospace defense contractor. The Octopus team is a group of 4 universities from Italy, as well as 2 corporations from there. I mentioned an open source team. This is our open source team called FredNet. I think they do now have members in 28 countries or something like that, most of whom are coming from a software writing background. You know, they've all done work on Linux and they love it, and they love the open source sort of atmosphere, and they said, oh hey, let's apply this to real hardware. It's a totally different operational paradigm. There's never been an organization anywhere in the aerospace community, anything like that. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Again, we just get to sit back and reap the benefits either way. This one here with the snake-like robot is a group of historically black colleges and university based out of Baltimore, but mainly sort of up and down the eastern seaboard. Almost all their work is being done by students. You know, their project manager is, I think, a 20-year-old African-American female. That's fantastic news for us. We're really, really excited about that. Yes?
When you say reap the benefits, do you mean that you license the technology regardless of whether it's operational?
No, we don't. Thank you. That's a good catch. We don't, but we feel that by virtue of this prize having been won, the entire world will benefit, and by virtue of all these different ideas having been proven or disproven, certainly the aerospace community is really going to benefit, because the next time NASA has $1 billion to spend on a mission to go to the moon, say that's about what a NASA lander will cost, about $1 billion, more or less. So maybe if these ideas have been proven and they can go to the moon for $50 million, the idea isn't let's spend $1 billion on one, the idea is, well, let's buy 10 of them and save money anyway. Or maybe let's still do the $1 billion mission, but we'll use one of these $50 missions to test out some of the critical components of that so that we don't risk losing our $1 billion mission, as tends to happen sometimes. It's sort of the nature of the business. So yes, we don't, the teams own all of their own intellectual property relating to their design and operation, and we are very careful to respect that. Next slide, please. So I don't know, do we have not all that much time left, so I'm not sure if we have the room through one or through one. So maybe I'll just sort of gloss through these, and again, if you have questions, go for it. The moon is hot real estate right now. As Brett said, no one has been on the surface since 1976. There was about a 20-year gap where no one even orbited the moon. Right now, there are 2 spacecraft in orbit around the moon. Today, a Japanese probe called Cayuga and a Chinese one called Chang'e. Within a few months, the Indians will launch a probe, as well as the Americans will launch both an orbiter that also shoots what's called a penetrator. Basically, they just shoot a bullet into the moon and film what happens. But after that, the US, the UK, China, Russia, Germany, Japan, a European-wide mission, everyone's looking at going to the moon. First with orbiters, then with landers, and many of them then with humans again. And we're looking at probably the next human being setting foot on the moon in 2020, thereabouts. What his or her nationality may be is up to question. But regardless, this means there's big money there, there's a big call for science, there's a big call for engineering developments, and we think that these teams are all going to service that. Next slide, please.